All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Dia Bondi. Dia, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
So nice to chat with you today. It's the second time we've connected in this way,
Yes.
and I've been looking forward to this conversation because I know, one, how seriously you take them, and two, how heart-centered you are when you do have these conversations.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, hosting this podcast over the last 3.5 years has been such an amazing experience in so many ways, and it never gets old. I love talking with entrepreneurs and having the conversation we're about to have, and this is going to be awesome experience not only for you and I, but for anybody who gets to listen in on this. And so, I've got to start though by just giving a shout out to Brianna over at the Interview Valet platform because man, those guys are phenomenal. That whole team over there, and Brianna is just the one that I happen to work with most all the time. She's the one. She's got such a great track record with me because she has never once recommended a guest for this podcast that has not been an amazing experience. And so now, Dia, whenever I get an email from her, it's like Christmas time because I'm like, I don't know exactly what's going to be in there, but it's going to be good. You
That's
know?
cool.
And that's a good way for somebody to show up in your inbox, you
No
know? And
kidding. No
so,
kidding. Yeah, you need
so
those curators in your life, don't you?
for
Like
sure. Yeah.
trusted curators for you. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, and what a testament right there to the power of right relationships, which of course is what this podcast is all about. And so what I want to do is I just want to dig right in with you and I want to give you the opportunity to just share about, what you do and who you serve and what inspires you most about what you get to do. And we'll just start there, Dia.
I would say, at my core, I help people speak powerfully right from who they are
Okay.
at the most critical moments in their businesses and careers. And those can be moments on a stage with 1,000 people listening, or it could be a phase in their business, a 3 or 6 month phase where something is leveled up and changed, an entrepreneur needs to discover a more elevated voice that they can
Okay.
use as sort of a go-to-market, a go-to-market advantage.
Uh-huh.
Um, and and I engage with my clients to do that work when they are leading organizations who are usually VC backed and past Series B, so they've got a product and market and growing teams and more complexity in front of them and critical communications moments on deck, or in-house professionals who are usually VP level and above and are recognizing that their voice, they can't afford to just be transactional with their voice. They really need to figure out what their core leadership narrative is and use it to carve a path for the relationships that will be transformational in the organization and in their own careers. So
Okay.
that's where I live. And on top of that, I wrote a funny book 2 years ago called Ask Like an Auctioneer, which took my impact hobby of fundraising auctioneering for women-led nonprofits and nonprofits benefiting women and girls and extracted the lessons I learned from standing in front of those rooms and plowed that into how folks can think about using asking as a success strategy in their entrepreneurship journeys and beyond.
Very cool. Very cool. I see your book on the shelf behind you
Yeah.
there and stuff. So I'm really curious now, Dia. How did you even get into doing what you do? How did you even become an entrepreneur and get into this?
I think, I'm going to say it started in fitness.
Okay.
Early days in college, I've always been sort of like a do it on my own kind of gal. For me, having jobs in college meant, I was a fitness instructor because I could, instead of making $8 an hour in the local, on the pub on campus, I could make $50 an hour teaching group fitness at 12 different clubs in our town and do it
Okay.
kind of on my own terms, right? Like that was fun. I got to be in charge of my own schedule. I didn't have a boss
50
telling me you got
bucks
to
an
be here
hour
at
ain't a
6.
bad rate, you know?
No,
Especially
exactly,
for a college kid.
especially in like 19 whatever
Yeah.
1994, like let's
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
And I really loved teaching and working in the fitness context because you're kind of working with people who are experiencing power in their own bodies in as a new way, in a new way,
Okay.
and bringing themselves forward into, whether it's in a group fitness class or individually, just to experience themselves more powerfully. And after college, I was looking for something that had that same quality, but in the business world.
Okay.
And I stumbled across something called, at that time, called training and development, which is what we think of as professional development or learning and development now.
Mhm.
And I met somebody who was in and around this space. And I was invited to come watch him teach a communication skills class, like what you'd think of as your typical like presentation skills course.
Okay.
Well, he was talking about storytelling in business in a way that nobody it's quite common now, but at that time it wasn't the way folks were talking about business presenting.
Mhm.
And I sat in the back of that room for 3 days and watched a whole bunch of director level folks go through a transformation in the front of the room that was so compelling to me, Kevin, that I walked away from those 3 days going, if I don't get to do this work, I might die. I mean, it
Wow.
was like
Wow.
folks listening, like, I'm sure there are 2 or 3 times in your career where you saw something and you were like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to be part of that. I want to play with those people. I want to build that product. And that had that real, like, compelling thing to me. And I was sort of, I had no business being there. I didn't have a resume that supported that desire.
Mhm.
But I will say that I made the ask that changed my life. That gentleman brought me in and let me watch his class. I asked if he would apprentice me,
Mhm.
and he did. And I very quickly got into the world of business and leadership communication. And I can't believe it's 25 years later and I still find it compelling and interesting. And mostly because I've seen how it really truly moves the needle for people. Like in a very, I can get a call back from a client that says we successfully launched that product in front of, 100 of the most important partners in the room. Or they can come back and say, I sat across the table and I secured that $50 million I needed. Or, I went out and talked to my team and engaged the team and a skeptical team in a way that now means we're on our path to, building our next thing. Like that's very satisfying and
Yeah.
addictive. And
Yeah.
I'll say that, like, to do it in my approach, which is my core philosophy, is that you are your most powerful when you speak from who you truly are. I
Amen.
get to see and tease out and help people articulate their own leadership truth. And it sounds squishy, it's actually not, in a way that is materially important to the business. And that's just a thrill.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And you know what? Yeah, messaging is so important,
Yeah, but it's
and
even pre-messaging, Kevin.
it's
Like, it's pre-messaging, meaning messaging is like, how do I say it?
uh-huh.
And where I love to live is the step before that, which is,
Okay.
what is it that I have to say?
Okay. Okay.
You hear the
Okay.
difference?
Yep. Yep.
Like, what is it that you have to say? And then we can go, how best is it expressed? But
Mhm.
until a leader can really articulate many things in their own leadership and their own business drive that feel very innate for them, are not obvious to us. So the first part of that is articulating what it is that you have to say, and then sitting down and asking, what is the message that brings the heart of it is that you have to say to life in a most accurate way.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Okay.
I mean,
That is such a
I can give you
powerful
examples,
distinction.
Kevin. Don't
Yeah.
challenge me. I can give you examples.
Well, so which is perfect because you already alluded to a little bit of you did kind of like broadly and quickly gave three examples, and I do want to dig deeper because what I was going to ask you is what is a result that you have helped, and you don't have to name names or nothing, but what's a
Sure.
result that you've helped a client get that you're just incredibly proud of?
Um, well, this year, yeah, Chatham House rules. So this year, I had a former client, alumni of mine, come back to
Okay.
me and need to put together a compelling story that engaged existing customers of hers. She's a technologist, founder of a sort of data-oriented company that helps build I need to articulate this in a way that is both anonymous but accurate, that helps build trust with consumers and build consumer loyalty. Okay. They're not an outward facing brand. They are sort of behind the scenes. Okay.
Okay.
Like products, the world of CPG uses them to help build trust with their customers, with the buyers. And she came back to me saying like, "Hey, we're putting together the summit with existing partners and existing customers, and I need to invite them to participate in something that will inform how our product gets built going forward and what gets added onto it. Sort of testament to like the power of partnerships, that they were really wanting to invite their customers in to essentially inform what they built next
Okay.
so that they could build something that actually matters to the people who will
Yep.
use their product,
Yep.
and not waste a lot of time and cycles building stuff based on, sort of guessing.
Sure.
And we put together a compelling story, drawing on knowing what it is that she has to say, in combination with the actual story of the business. Like we were able to bridge those two things very clearly
Mhm.
and set up a really killer ask for her, which she reached out to me the day after she made it in front of that room, that she had secured the participation she needed to secure. And I asked her what the value, how much value was going to be created because people said yes to engaging with her in the way she made the request of the room of. By the way, the story she told was a good 40-minute long story to set up that ask. This is,
Okay.
it's deep work.
Sure.
Um, and she said, I think it'll probably drive about $10 million of value in our business.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Wow.
And to say to her on Tuesday when she was going to do the talk on Wednesday, hey, break a leg, and then on Thursday, hear that she had gotten what she wanted and that was going to drive that much value in her business, was like, I mean, to
That's
me,
huge.
that's a high.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I can see how that would have you a little bit jazzed, Dia.
oh my God, it's crazy and exciting to me. But sometimes the way folks listening right now, like, you don't have to make a $10 million story and request to have something drive an enormous value for you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes being able to articulate a point of view that you have in a way that feels very aligned to who you are and bridges nicely to the person sitting in front of you and to the business you're trying to grow, when it really lands, even if it's just the two of you across the table and it works, that can be a window into making it work again and again and again and again and again, and to build your mastery. So it's sometimes like those single smaller moments have huge value over time because they set you on a trajectory of being successful with your voice, uh, conversation over conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that first one is not worth $10 million.
Sure.
Maybe it's worth, you can't point to a value at all except
Yeah.
that the shift that happens for you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. 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 Well, okay. So now we've got a little bit of context, and I guarantee you, we've probably got some folks listening to this going, "Man, I want to talk with Dia more."
Yeah.
And I promise, if that's where you're at right now, I won't let you down. I'll make sure at the end we cover that. But for right now, I want to shift gears and I want to ask another question.
Sure.
And so, Dia, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah. I thought of this earlier and I had one that was really quality of life and
Okay.
one that was about sort of value in my business.
Uh-huh.
But now I have like two that are standing out in the value of my business.
Okay.
Okay. So one was an introduction that I was drawn into by a former client who had gone on to do some work in with a blockchain company.
Okay.
And it was the first time, they were like right at a time where the founders were building, and I was working directly with the founders to help them understand and develop their own unique leadership voice that they could bring to the table, whether they're external conversations, conversations with investors, conversations with community who were using their technology to build projects, or with their employees or contributors. And for some reason, I hadn't been in a position before to set up a deal that included both cash and shares.
Okay.
And that was the first one I'd done it. And let's just say that it paid off for me. And importantly, sort of an example of what I said before, once I did that first deal, I now feel more confident, and I have an understanding of how to recreate more deals when the opportunities I see, present themselves to me.
Mhm.
And so it was one of those things where you do it once and now you have the opportunity to do it over and over again because it's now in your radar.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was a really, I'm very grateful to the person that connected me to that engagement and for the opportunity to explore other ways that I can work with my clients in a way that we're both invested a little differently than just a
Yep.
scope of work for cash.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really because it's interesting. I've been doing what I do, full time. It's been my full-time gig for 8 years, and I get to be this connector and conduit of trust for entrepreneurs. And I do charge a monthly retainer for doing what I do,
Sure.
but then I also do a revenue share
Yeah.
with clients too and stuff. And candidly, the revenue share I love the revenue share.
Yeah,
And
and it puts everybody's skin in the game a little
yeah,
differently, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. And now, I've had people around me that have known me for years, especially one of my friends who is an investor and stuff, and I've known him for 14 years. And he's like, Kevin, he's like, that's really great that you're doing revenue share stuff, but he's like, you should really be looking at equity too in some of the
Yep.
work you do. And so now that's coming into play. And so
Yep.
like I'm really in tune when people start talking about stuff like that, because that's coming into play in my world too and stuff,
Yep.
and
The other one for me was I got a ping. This is like an introduction that wasn't like in the subject line,
uh-huh.
introduction, this person and this person. It was an introduction that happened more behind the scenes,
Okay.
but I think it just speaks to the power of relationships
Mhm.
and how they stay with people even after you leave the room. So I've done a bunch of work in the Olympic world, and Olympic bidding has changed considerably since my first invitation into the Olympic movement.
Okay.
But I got a request over the internet that said, "Hey, I'm working on an interesting international project. We heard you're good. Can you give us a call?" And I was like, "What is that?" And I gave them a call, and turned out to be the production team that was working on Rio's bid for to help them win the right to host the 2016 Olympics.
Okay.
Which, you know, I'm not going to say the number right, so don't hold me to it, but like it's like a $7 billion decision, right? Like the amount of spend that a country has in a project like that, and the amount of revenue it generates, et cetera. And so I got to go to Rio and work on this crazy project, which then sent me to Turkey. I worked on Turkey's bid, and I did a bunch of stuff with the Commonwealth Games Federation, and I did a bunch of stuff in the Olympic movement, and that was extremely challenging because the context and the dynamics of those situations are much different than they are in like the startup world.
Mhm.
But it
Mhm.
was, self-expanding and, you know, skill expanding and deeply challenging and an incredible adventure. And I would say like a very like not a lot of people get to peer into those teeny tiny rooms where,
Sure.
stories are getting crafted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I still don't know really who referred me.
Huh.
I still don't know. And but I have a clue as to who it might be. And I've tried to poke around to go, who entered, like who gave you my name? And I think it was a producer and this other thing, and it just never was able to like get a name attached to it.
Mhm.
But it doesn't matter because I'm sure I know what part of the work I was doing that came from, and I'm sure, and I don't want to play the game of like just work hard and people will notice. You had to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
You have to intentionally build relationships. You have to make the requests that build value for everyone. You have to, do the work and speak up for what you want. But at the same time, I just recognize that when we really come to our work with heart and drive and a deep desire to make somebody else successful, um, and be willing to like get in the mess that makes that happen,
Yeah.
that's how people make connections to you that can be transformational.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And all that you just said, just showing up, being us, doing our thing, even though we might be world class at it like you are, that's not enough. That's not we do have to proactively ask for what we want. And I'll tell you what, we start asking, and then because most of us, I don't know what percentage of entrepreneurs. I know, a lot of entrepreneurs are just really giving, generous people, and
Totally.
I've been that way my whole life.
Of
But for
course.
most of my life, until 13 years ago, I totally sucked at the receiving part, and God forbid asking for what I wanted because I wouldn't do it.
And here's the thing, like making good strategic asks does not require, like we can be askers and generous at the
Yes,
same time.
yes.
They don't eclipse each other.
That's right. That's right.
If
100%.
you can lead with empathy and really understand what the offer is that you have that is inside of the ask that you make. Now,
Yeah.
along those lines, I will say what you're pointing to is so true, and it's at every single level,
Yeah.
along the trajectory of your
Absolutely.
career.
Yep.
And I'll say that there are like 6 attributes really that I notice, like the most powerful communicators that I work with, whether they're, an entrepreneur out doing a fundraise or, a head of engineering that's talking about, the direction we're going with product or whatever, the most compelling communicators I work with, whether it's because I help make them that way or it's something they brought to the table, consists of these 6 attributes. Can I share those with
Yeah.
your audience, folks
Yeah.
who are listening? And folks who are listening, you might want to ask yourself, like on a scale of 1 to 5, where do I fall on each of these?
Okay.
And that might help you. We're recording this right now at the end of 2025. If you're like, okay, where's my professional development in 2026? If you're in the 3 or below on any one of these 6 attributes, that might be a place for you to go like, oh, I'll pick up a book about that or take a workshop about that or, find a mentor that can help me grow that part of my leadership voice. So I don't know if
Okay.
that's something that's interesting to folks, but one is like all of the most compelling communicators are not about being like super polished and whatnot, but they just make the choice to be big in big moments. And that's never about like being a showboat. It's about making the courageous choice to tell this story instead of that one as an example. It's, being able to deciding to ask the more compelling question instead of the sort of base hit. It's the choice to open the dialogue with something that feels bigger, you know,
Yep.
than something that feels kind of like, welcome everyone, the bathrooms are down the hall and we're going to have our first snack break at 11. It feels more tactical. So they always make a choice to be big in big moments. And I cannot tell you how often I work with a client. I just got done with a huge technology conference, getting like 18 different executives ready for this big, huge technology conference. And predictably, you know, predictably, when we're crafting their opening sentence, they'll say something compelling that makes them smile and they'll instantly go, oh, is that too much? And then they'll say, you know what? No, this is how I have to set it. Like, I want to set the stage for who I am in this market. I have to start strong, you know? So they make that choice to be big in big moments, number one. Number two, they really know how to make strategic asks and they use asking strategically,
Okay.
like to what you're pointing to, right? So they know when to ask, who to make the ask of. They understand that an ask has multiple layers and can generate value for everyone. They're very like thoughtful about what they're asking for and of whom they're making that ask. And
Okay.
they do it, you know? Um, the third one is that they absolutely know their voice. So, folks who are listening, if you're like, could I say that I know my voice? On a scale of 1 to 5, folks who I work with who are the most compelling, they can say they know their voice. They can work with their chief of staff when their chief of staff gives them, remarks and say like, this doesn't quite sound like me,
Okay.
and actually give direction on how to make it sound more like me. They have a compelling and clear way of saying, here's what I believe, here's the point I want to talk about, here I want to use more examples in product and less in operations, and here's why. Like they can give good feedback so they can have good creative collaborators with them and
Yeah.
originate content that feels more aligned to who they are. So those are the first three. The second three are they've got killer setups for the asks that they make of their partners in the world. The fifth one is that they bridge their own voice to the business really well. And the last one is they prep like on purpose. They don't talk about what they're gonna do. They actually prepare by talking through it. They
Okay.
actually act it out in order to and develop their own like sort of pre-game routine.
Hmm.
I had one client who was a founder, went through a big fundraise. It was exhausting. And he figured out the best way that he preps for any big fundraising conversation was that he would end a call, go downstairs, change his shirt, wash his face, and drink a glass of water and walk back upstairs and get on his next call. Like if he did that 6 times in a day, he'd go through 6 shirts. But,
Uh-huh.
like kind of developing his own pre-game prep routine to
Yeah.
help him start anew at the beginning of every conversation. So those are the 6 things that help us go from exactly what you were saying. Oh, I just put my head down and people will notice. No, to actually intentionally go get those things that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Thank you
is
for coming. Thank you for
incredibly.
coming to my TED Talk.
There you go. There you go, everybody. Well, I'll tell you, dear, I am so thankful that you took the time to have this conversation today and just share from your heart. And I'm really excited to get this out there. But I want to make sure I want to ask you, any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
I mean, I think I would just say that I don't think so. I mean, this world for me is it's all about making real connections and bringing your real voice forward. And you know, I'm curious from you, Kevin, are there conversations, not just partnerships or relationships, but were there conversations in your own career that you can see that changed the trajectory of things for you? Communications moments, stage moments, or conversations that you had that pivoted things for you?
Well, there. I'm just trying to think. Was it? I mean, I've had some experiences, and well, so yes, there is a conversation that was an absolute game changer for me, and it happened all the way back in this would have been 2003. Man, time flies. 2003. So this was 22 years ago, and at the time, I owned a cleaning and restoration company,
Huh.
and
Like cleaning and restoration for buildings, like or
yeah,
homes?
buildings
Okay.
and homes, and we served higher end homes and all of that. And but yes, carpet cleaning, upholstery cleaning, we did water damage restoration and all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And but I also had this website that I had started as an extension of that business, probably one of the ugliest websites on the internet, called getmoldsolutions.com. It's not around anymore, but
I mean, it was 2003. Like,
yes,
websites
yes.
weren't known for their beauty at that point.
And that little website, it was producing about $15,000 a month for the business. And so Joe Polish, who was my mentor at the time, he used to put on these annual events for the cleaning and restoration industry. And he's like, Kev, he's like, why don't you come down here to the event this November and show everybody what you're doing with your website? And I was like, all right. And he's like, and before you come, be sure to document what you do and how you do it, because a certain percentage of the people are, once they hear from you, they're going to want your help, and just make sure you've got it put into a course so that you can offer them your help. And I was like, okay. And so, Dia, I had never spoken public before. I invested in this training that I found out about called the Speakers Boot Camp that was put on like by Ron LeGrand and Dan Kennedy and some other speaking guys. And I invested in that, and I used that to help me create my presentation. And I spoke at Joe's event. And at the end, I just said, hey, if what I've shared resonates with you, if you feel like I might be able to help you, here's what that would look like. Here's what the investment is. And we ended up making $35,000 in sales of that course that day. And that was a big win for sure. In fact, I was just like, wow, look at what I
Surprise.
did.
Yeah.
That's way cool. But that wasn't the big win. The big win was that the following year, I had so much fun doing that. And then now I had clients that were investing with me every month too for ongoing groups coaching support. Well, over the next 12 years, I ended up selling the cleaning business April 19th of 2024. So just a few months later, I moved into the publishing company full time, and we sold $16.1 million worth of that course over the next 12
Holy
years. and
macaroni.
so, and so all because of that one conversation with Joe. Why don't you come down and speak at the event this year? That was a game-changing thing.
It really, this is what I mean that like, and I heard you say that like you brought to that experience sort of like a yes energy and a joyfulness and willingness to share. Also, it sounds like you were like, yeah, I'll write all this up and share it with folks. It doesn't, you came with some generosity, maybe you weren't withholding, you're like, just if you want more of this, here's where to get it.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that like these when we recognize these like communications moments where we really have people listening, they can be an incredible strike point for your leadership and like can really help you hang all the lefts and rights that you need to, that can change the trajectory of things. And that's great. It also sounds like, the moral of that story to me is like when you're invited, say yes.
Yeah. Well, and then, I didn't, because I'd never had the experience before. I'd never spoken public before, and I'm not going to lie. That was a little, I was nervous about
Oh,
that
sure,
for
it's
sure,
intense.
but investing in that training. In fact, what's funny is probably about 5 months ago, I got to interview Ron LeGrand for this podcast. And I told him about investing in that course of his way back when. And he's like, you don't want a refund, do you? But it
And
was
now it's a
so
big part. You're in front of audiences a lot now, aren't you?
all the time now. Yeah, all the time. And I'm also regularly in communication with, oh my goodness, entrepreneurs running businesses anywhere from, I don't know, 500,000 on up to 750 million and everything in between,
Sure.
and I'm totally comfortable talking with entrepreneurs regardless of what they do or how big their business is or whatever. I don't care. It's
Yep.
just because what I have come to realize that we're a whole lot more alike than we are different. And every single one of us, we're all doing the best we can with what we
Yeah,
got.
I mean, I find that too. I've done enough of this work now that I can. There's some things that are kind of just universal. I don't care if you're in financial services, if you're in blockchain, if you're in, research, if you're, a medical researcher, if you're in data scientist, if you're a entrepreneur, if you're a COO type, if you're in finance, like, I mean, I'm agnostic. The Olympic movement, I'm agnostic to subject,
Yeah,
and because I start to see that these are just there are some common themes that show up over and over again, and we can just get to that quickly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like having a lot of at bats really helps.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Having at bats helps. That the practice helps.
Just get in it.
Yes, yes. Well, Dia, for anybody that's listening to this going, man, Kevin, I really like Dia. I love how she shows up. And she's also got a serious skill set. For anybody that's thinking about that and like, man, I'd really like to connect more with her or find out more about the work she does. Maybe she can help us, or maybe I know somebody else that I would want to let know about Dia. What's the best way to do that?
So you can just go to diabondi.com, and the
Okay.
two places to look, I think, are send me a note there.
Okay.
I love working on strong and important strategic projects. I have an inquiry today, a new group of entrepreneurs that are going into their Series B fundraise and are looking for some help, not just thinking about like help with the pitch, but thinking about how does a founder think about laying the groundwork for the fundraise that they're going to do? How do they show up in these critical communications moments? So if that's you, you could just send me a note and we'll find out if we're a good fit.
Perfect.
And I also host an intensive a couple of times
Yes.
a year, which sometimes is a better fit for folks if they don't have a longer and deep project that they need to engage me in. And you
Okay.
can find that at diabondi.com also. There's a window right there that'll take you to the intensive. I host those in Northern California. And
Okay.
crossed, I'm hoping to try to do one in Europe sometime in the
Oh,
future. It's one of the things I'm dreaming about. So
well,
yeah,
very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I will make sure we include that with the show notes and stuff.
thank
And
you.
I'll tell you, my goal for this podcast has always been twofold. For you, Dia, the guest, I want to just give you the opportunity to share your experience and also to share your experience around this topic of relationships and honor some people that have been really valuable in your life and in your business. And on the other side, for our listeners who they too are entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs, I just want to use these stories to inspire them to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives. And with your help, Dia, we definitely delivered on that today. And so I want to thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you, and I'm excited to get this out there.
Thanks, Kevin.
You're so welcome.